Not too long ago, the mere mention of coups and military takeovers in Africa sent chills down people's spines. Military regimes were seen as the ultimate symbol of harsh authoritarian rule, the enemy of freedom and democracy. But fast forward to today, and that fear is starting to fade. In fact, across many parts of Africa, especially among younger generations, coups are starting to be seen in a different light, almost as acts of revolution. This shift is largely inspired by military leaders in countries like Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, who have shaken up the political scene. People are now openly calling for coups in places where presidents have clung to power for decades. Think Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea. So here's the big question. Could Uganda be next? Just days ago, Uganda's top military officer publicly praised President Ibrahim Traoré, the strongman from Burkina Faso, and even invited him to visit. On the surface, it seemed like a friendly nod of solidarity, but underneath, whispers started spreading. Is this just political respect or something more? Could Uganda's army chief be eyeing the throne himself? To understand this, let's rewind. Back in the 1960s and 70s, Uganda's current president, Yoweri Museveni, was a young rebel fighting to overthrow brutal dictators like Idi Amin and Milton Obote. In 1986, Museveni took power and delivered a powerful message that still resonates. The problem in Africa, and especially Uganda, isn't the people, it's leaders who refuse to step down. But now, more than 36 years later, Museveni is still in charge. It's like he forgot his own words. He's even gone as far as to change the constitution to remove presidential term limits, basically paving the way for himself to rule for life. And in a shocking twist, he openly says that long stays in power aren't bad. In fact, he argues that they're necessary for experience and stability. Sure, Museveni did bring some calm and economic growth after years of chaos, but these days, plenty of Ugandans are tired. They want change, and they want it now. Yet Museveni refuses to budge, ruling with a firm grip, all while claiming to be a champion of democracy. So the question hangs in the air. Is Uganda quietly inching toward its own coup? And if it happens, what would that mean for the future? For years now, those who've dared to stand up to Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni have faced serious consequences, arrests, threats, and in some cases, even mysterious deaths. The message has been loud and clear. Challenge the system and you're putting everything at risk. But beneath the surface, a storm is brewing. From civil society activists to political insiders, and even within the ranks of the military, the call for change is growing louder. People are tired of Museveni's decades-long grip on power, tired of empty promises, and tired of waiting. Which brings us to the big question, could Uganda's military be next to stage a coup? We'll circle back to that, but first, let's rewind to Sunday, May 25, 2025. That day, something happened that shook the political landscape. General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, head of the Ugandan army and, crucially, Museveni's own son, posted a bold message on his official X account, formerly Twitter. He praised Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, for his anti-imperialist stance and went so far as to invite him to Uganda. His exact words, "I support the anti-imperialist position of President Ibrahim Traoré. His views are like ours. It is always right to resist imperialists and exploiters." That wasn't just some feel-good shout-out, it was loaded with political meaning. Coming from the top of Uganda's military, it raised eyebrows across the region. Was this admiration, alignment, or something deeper? Maybe even a sign of where Muhoozi's ambitions are headed. Let's unpack it. President Museveni has been openly critical of the military-led governments in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. After those coups, he condemned them, accused them of dragging Africa backward, and pushed the African Union to slap sanctions on the new regimes. He distanced himself completely. But here's the irony. Museveni, who's ruled Uganda with an increasingly autocratic hand for nearly 40 years, is denouncing military leaders who, at least in their rhetoric, are fighting for sovereignty and against foreign exploitation. Unlike Museveni, these young leaders claim to represent the will of the people. And now Museveni's own son is publicly backing one of them. That's no accident. It tells us a lot. Admiration, maybe even inspiration. Because while Muhoozi may be the face of Uganda's army, In many ways, he's the opposite of Traoré. Let's compare. Traoré fought his way to the top through sheer grit. He earned respect from his troops in the field, not in political backrooms. He's seen as authentic, a leader forged in battle. Muhoozi, his story is very different. Yes, he completed his military training, but his rise was jet-fueled by family ties. By 2012, still in his 30s, he was already a brigadier general and leading Uganda's elite special forces, thanks largely to his father's influence. In 2017, Museveni handed him the role of senior presidential advisor, and even when Muhoozi posted reckless, controversial statements online in 2022 so bad they forced Museveni to publicly fire him, he wasn't down for long. Instead of disappearing, he was promoted again, this time to full general, and then, in 2024, to chief of defense. No election, no meritocracy, just power passing from father to son. Now contrast that with Traoré, a captain who earned every stripe on the battlefield. In Burkina Faso, his authority is rooted in trust and sacrifice. In Uganda, Muhoozi's authority is rooted in nepotism. And here's where things get dangerous. Many inside Uganda's military are quietly furious. They see the favoritism. They feel the injustice. So, if Muhoozi ever decided to make a move to stage a coup and seize power, he might pull it off in the short term. But would it last? Unlikely. Because when power comes through privilege, not respect, it doesn't tend to stick. So we circle back to that burning question. Can the Ugandan army take over? And if it does, would Muhoozi be the one leading it? The pieces are moving, and Uganda may be inching closer to a political crossroads. A throne built on favoritism without real loyalty? That's always a shaky one. And right now, a lot of Ugandans believe the writing's on the wall. President Museveni is grooming his son, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, to take over when he steps down or never steps down. This isn't just idle gossip. Museveni has ruled Uganda for more than 36 years, and Muhoozi's lightning-fast climb up the military ladder has raised serious eyebrows. Back in 2013, General David Sajusa, once Museveni's close ally, blew the whistle in a letter that sent shockwaves through Uganda's political scene. Sajusa laid it out bluntly. Uganda was turning into a political monarchy, and Museveni was plotting to hand over the presidency to his son. Even more chilling, he warned that top military officers who opposed this plan were quietly being targeted for assassination. That letter shook the country. Since then, the idea that Uganda is heading toward dynastic rule has only gained steam. Of course, both Museveni and Muhoozi denied it all, but the government's reaction told a very different story. After Sajusa's letter went public, Museveni's administration launched one of the toughest media crackdowns in Uganda's history. The Daily Monitor newspaper was under police siege for more than 10 days. 2 independent newspapers and 2 radio stations were shut down. If Sajusa's claims were baseless, why clamp down so hard? The answer feels obvious. The letter hit too close to home. As for Sajusa himself, the consequences were swift and severe. He fled Uganda, spending a year in exile in the UK. When he finally came back in 2016, he was arrested and charged with insubordination. His fate sent a clear warning. Oppose the president's dynastic ambitions, and you pay a heavy price. Truth is, Uganda might not even need a coup to switch leadership. The country is quietly being reshaped into a monarchy, dressed up in democratic clothes. That's where the second big difference between Muhoozi and Burkina Faso's president Ibrahim Traoré comes in. Traoré is a true anti-imperialist and pan-Africanist. Since day one, he's been laser-focused on genuine independence and African sovereignty. He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk, cutting ties with France, deepening partnerships with Russia, and building the AES bloc with Mali and Niger. Every move Traoré makes is part of a clear vision to free Burkina Faso and Africa from foreign control. Now, Muhoozi publicly declared his support for Traoré's anti-imperialist stance. He said, "I support the anti-imperialist position of President Ibrahim Traoré. His views are like ours." Hold on. That's where we need to pause, because that's where the story gets complicated. Museveni and Muhoozi want to paint themselves as anti-imperialists, but the facts tell a different story. Museveni only started clashing with the West recently, And it wasn't out of some grand Pan-African awakening. It came from political fallout. The turning point? Uganda passing one of the world's harshest anti-gay laws. That sparked outrage. Western governments condemned the law, froze aid, and pulled funding. Suddenly, Museveni wasn't Washington's favorite anymore. But rewind a few years, and it's a totally different picture. For decades, Museveni was the West's golden boy. He aligned closely with U.S. foreign policy, received huge aid packages, and was a key American ally in East Africa. There was no talk of resisting imperialism, just cooperation. So when Muhoozi says his views are like Traoré's, we have to ask, whose views exactly? Traoré's fight is grounded in principle. Museveni's fallout with the West, it's political convenience. For years, the U.S. made sure Uganda got a steady stream of foreign aid and donor support. Museveni used a lot of that help to fight HIV/AIDS and boost the economy, earning him a reputation as a progressive, pragmatic leader, a success story the West was eager to embrace. They praised him, funded him, and largely looked the other way when cracks in his leadership began to show, like Uganda's involvement in the late 1990s invasions of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's rewind the tape. Uganda and Rwanda, under Presidents Museveni and Kagame, didn't just meddle in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They launched 2 full-scale invasions. And what did the so-called global champions of justice do? Not much. Washington stayed quiet. Europe looked the other way. Not a single sanction, not even a slap on the wrist. It wasn't until African voices began demanding answers that the silence broke. Eventually, both Ugandan and Rwandan forces faced charges at The Hague: war crimes, plundering Congo's riches, torturing civilians, carrying out executions, even deploying child soldiers. So when Museveni now parades himself as an anti-imperialist, it rings hollow. The same man who cries sovereignty and African unity once violated another African nation's borders, twice, leaving devastation in his wake. And it gets worse. Museveni holds the grim distinction of being the African president who betrayed Muammar Gaddafi to the West. While many on the continent saw Gaddafi as a flawed but committed Pan-Africanist, Museveni called him a problem, someone he claimed was holding Africa back. According to diplomatic sources, Museveni was no mere bystander. He acted as a U.S. informant, feeding intel on his fellow African leaders. That's not Pan-Africanism, that's opportunism. And now there's his son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Unlike President Traoré of Burkina Faso, Muhoozi isn't a revolutionary. He has no ideology, no grounded worldview, no story of struggle. What he does have is privilege handed rank after rank, power without purpose. If we're honest, Muhoozi often comes off like a grown man playing dress-up in military fatigues, unsure what to do with the power he's been given. While Traoré is known across Africa for standing tall against foreign influence, Muhoozi is better known for tweeting, and not in any strategic, meaningful way. Insiders say many of Muhoozi's wild online rants come after a few too many drinks. His most reckless moment came in 2022 when he tweeted that he might invade Kenya. Yes, Uganda's neighbor. The tweet sparked an international incident and forced his own father to publicly apologize. As damage control, Museveni stripped him of his military post and warned him to stay off social media. But just days later, surprise, surprise, Museveni reversed course. He defended his son, called him a very good general, promoted him to full general, and reappointed him as a special advisor to the president. And those warnings about staying off social media? Ignored. Muhoozi kept tweeting. At one point, he bizarrely claimed he was descended from Jesus Christ. In another tweet, he offered cows as dowry to marry the Prime Minister of Italy. It gets darker. In April 2023 alone, Muhoozi mocked a fellow officer, quoted Mao Zedong's infamous line about not killing enough people, and made crude, sexist remarks about much younger women. When a female journalist called him out, he publicly insulted her appearance. These might sound like clownish antics, but Muhoozi isn't just some Twitter loudmouth. He commands real power. As the former head of the Special Forces Command, SFC, a unit fiercely loyal to the Museveni family, Muhoozi oversaw a force accused of brutality, abducting opposition figures, murdering political aides, and even storming Uganda's parliament during a heated constitutional showdown. That's not leadership, that's lawlessness wrapped in a uniform. And then there's the case of Kakwenza Rukarabashija. In 2021, the Ugandan novelist dared to poke fun at Muhoozi on Twitter, calling him obese and a curmudgeon. Days later, he vanished. For weeks, there was no trace of him. When he finally resurfaced, his back was a patchwork of deep, raw scars. Kakwenza claimed Muhoozi not only ordered the torture, but was there in person, supervising it. Let that sink in. This is the man some say is next in line for power in Uganda. But here's the twist. Not everyone in Uganda's inner circle is on board. Behind the scenes, senior military and government officials are working to block Muhoozi's rise. They see the danger. Uganda's Interior Minister, Kahinda Odafire, said it plainly. Leading a country isn't a joke just because you have a lot of Twitter followers. And he's right, because at the end of the day, Uganda deserves more than a Twitter general. It deserves leadership rooted in service, not spectacle. In 2022, the unexpected happened. General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, yes, the son of Uganda's long-standing president, didn't aim his fire at the opposition. He turned his sights inward, taking a shot at the very party his own father built, the National Resistance Movement, the NRM. He tweeted, "It is probably the most reactionary organization in the country. It certainly does not represent the people of Uganda." Let that sink in. The president's son publicly trashed his father's legacy. And this is the man who wants to lead Uganda next? Muhoozi tweets more than he leads, and the wounds he leaves often go far beyond words. In another headline-making tweet, he announced his intention to run for president in 2025. And this time, the gloves came off. He wrote, "How many agree with me that our time has come? Enough of the old people ruling us, dominating us. It's time for our generation to shine." Bold words, a not-so-subtle swipe at his own father. But are people buying it? Sure, Muhoozi has his fans, mostly among a segment of younger Ugandans drawn to his bravado and rebellious image. But the truth is, the majority of the country isn't sold. The idea of a Museveni dynasty doesn't sit well with many Ugandans, young or old. They're not just questioning his experience, they're questioning his character, his judgment, and his vision if he even has one. Ugandans are asking the real question, is this the best we've got? And when it comes to power, let's be honest, Muhoozi doesn't hold the cards. Not really. Could he stage a coup to take over from his father? In theory? Maybe. In reality? Not a chance. The only realistic path for Muhoozi to become president is with his father's direct approval. Why? Because the military, the real muscle behind any serious power move, is still firmly in President Museveni's grip. This isn't guesswork, it's strategy. Museveni doesn't just command the Uganda People's Defense Forces, UPDF. He controls it like a chessboard, where he constantly reshuffles his generals, keeping everyone guessing, off balance, loyal. It's not about modernizing the army, it's about consolidating power and keeping challengers far from the throne. As opposition leader Ibrahim put it, Museveni has purged nearly all his wartime comrades from the Luwero Bush War. The few who remain, they're strangers now. They don't have the courage or the history to challenge him. And he's right. The last person who tried to push back? Former Prime Minister Amama Mbabazi, a powerful figure in Museveni's inner circle until he wasn't. Museveni clipped his wings with surgical precision, like he was erasing a name from the script. This isn't just a presidency, it's a fortress. Inside this fortress, loyalty is currency, dissent is dangerous, and the keys to power are locked tight, far from the hands of ordinary Ugandans or even the president's own son. Because in Museveni's Uganda, no one gets in without his say-so, not even family. Here's the cold truth every top-ranking official in Uganda's military, including the Chief of Defense Forces, didn't get there because they were the most skilled, the most strategic, or the most They got there because of one thing: loyalty. Loyalty not to the country, loyalty not to the Constitution, loyalty to one man, President Yoweri Museveni. And that loyalty runs deep, so deep that the idea of these generals suddenly turning on Museveni and backing his son, General Muhoozi, in some surprise coup? Highly unlikely, practically impossible, which brings us to the only logical conclusion. If there's ever going to be a coup in Uganda, it won't happen without Museveni's blessing. And maybe, just maybe, that's been the plan all along. Muhoozi's military rise isn't about earning power, it's about inheriting it. A torch pass. A staged transition dressed up to look like a military takeover, but orchestrated from the top. And let's be clear, if a coup ever happens in Uganda, it won't be some bold, grassroots revolution. It won't be driven by the people. It'll be a coronation, the official birth of a political dynasty, carefully packaged for public consumption. That's a far cry from what we've seen in Burkina Faso, Mali, or Niger. Those were popular uprisings, raw, unpredictable, led by soldiers who answered to the people, not their families. So now we ask you, what's really coming for Uganda? Is the country standing at the edge of change or on the brink of a royal handoff? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We do read them. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more unfiltered stories from across Africa. You won't want to miss what's coming next.